In a land of sand, life is tough. It can sink away in an instant. The Arabian desert is one of the most challenging places on Earth. But the animals here are resilient and specialized. Still, death is never far away. Creatures must seize every opportunity to find food, shelter, and water. Adaptability is the key to life and death in the dunes. One of Arabia's most iconic animals. It's often cited as original inspiration for the wondrous mythical creature, the unicorn. When viewed from the side, the Arabian oryx looks like a large white animal with a single long horn. In fact, it's an antelope, one of the best adapted to a life in the furnace. The dominant oryx bull starts his day looking over his herd. As the sun rises, the group will adapt their behavior to cope with the changing conditions it brings. Oryx typically form small groups of less than a dozen. Any more would put too much pressure on the scant vegetation. There's a strict hierarchy that's enforced with posturing and head gestures. The dominant animals of both sexes use their 60-centimeter horns to make their point. Only the dominant male breeds. This herd bull spends most of his time patrolling. He monitors the females for hormonal changes that signal they are ready to breed. He does so by tasting her urine. He curls his lip, a strange grimace known as flamen, to pull the scent to what's called the Jacobson's organ on the roof of his mouth. With this, he can sense her hormone levels and determine when she'll be ready to mate. She doesn't seem to be ready just yet. The herd has other things to worry about. Their first challenge of the day is to warm up. At night, the temperature only drops to around 20 degrees Celsius. But to creatures built to withstand heat, which can exceed 50 degrees, that feels cold. The oryx turn themselves to stand side-on to the warming sun, exposing as much of their bodies as possible. Though they have white hair to reflect the heat, they're black-skinned underneath and can raise their hair to allow more of the rays to reach the darker, heat-absorbing color beneath. They won't have long to wait. The sun will bake the land in short order. The Arabian Peninsula is the largest peninsula on Earth, over 3 million square kilometers. It's dominated by an array of deadly landscapes. Vast sand dunes roll into dry gravel plains, fringed by desolate rocky hills. This is the Arabian Desert. Hostile and barren, a land seemingly devoid of life. Animals and plants that live here must cope with extremes of temperature, suffocating shifting sand, and an almost complete absence of water. They must also survive each other. Arabia was once part of Africa and covered in lush green plains. 35 million years ago, there was no Red Sea, so animals could freely move back and forth. 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, sea levels rose and flooded what is now the Red Sea. Animals were stranded on the Arabian Peninsula, and as the climate changed, the plains dried out. The options were simple: adapt or die. The survivors are now masters of the desert. But even for these hardiest of creatures, life is a constant struggle. Food, water, and shelter are in short supply, especially as the desert turns up the heat. It's only 7 a.m., but the mercury is already in the high 20s. For animals the size of an oryx to survive, they must keep constantly on the move, seeking out every possible opportunity to eat. They'll make a non-stop journey of 120 kilometers or more to get to fresh grazing. There are several youngsters in the group, all sired by the herd bull. Being smaller and more vulnerable doesn't win the calves any favors. They still have to give way to higher-ranking individuals. Now between 2 and 3 months old, they still suckle from their mothers. The young are browner in color than the adults, a useful trait giving them some degree of camouflage against the sand. Other calves in the group are 5 months old. Their brown coats are already fading. They weaned nearly a month ago and scrape a living from whatever desert vegetation they can find. Regardless of their age, the young are expected to keep up. The herd's home range can be 2,500 square kilometers. They never stay in one area for more than a few months to avoid overgrazing. But moving can bring new challenges. The herd has wandered into the territory of a lone bull. Until they can secure a herd, bulls lead a solitary existence, guarding their turf and waiting for available females to pass through. But this group already has its herd bull. For many animals, this would be a certain fight, and their horns are potentially lethal. But for these desert dwellers, there's a far greater threat: the heat. A fight would waste valuable energy, but the lone bull wants the herd. It may be worth a challenge. Posturing They size each other up. The brief tussle's enough to persuade the loner that it's a fight he can't win. He lets the herd pass through his territory unhindered. It might be a long, tough journey. One of the biggest challenges here is the terrain. Sand. This shifting, gritty, irritating topography has shaped one of the desert's most extreme specialists. The sandfish. He's not a fish at all, but a lizard. A type of skink. Like all reptiles, he's cold-blooded and starts his day basking in the sun to warm up. Scientists long thought his stout limbs were tucked against his sides to help him sink under the sand. Recent studies have revealed that they rotate back and forth using the front crawl stroke. He can literally swim through the sand. What's sleek and streamlined beneath the sand looks a lot clumsier on the surface. His short legs give him a distinctive waddle. Most small animals have no choice other than to hide away during the blazing heat of the day. But larger animals have no such luxury. Some of the most famous specialists live out on the rocky plains. Known as the ships of the desert, camels are the ultimate desert survivors. Dromedaries, or one-humped camels, aren't truly wild. They're a domesticated species that now roams free. Fossil evidence suggests that they were domesticated here 4,000 years ago. By 2,000 years ago, their wild ancestors were extinct. Nonetheless, they still have their predecessors' remarkable adaptations that enable them to survive this fierce desert. In the midst of the group is a tiny youngster, just a few weeks old, still showing the last traces of the umbilical cord that once connected him to his mother. Older cousins gather around him. There's no real hierarchy in camel society. Outside the breeding season, females and males live in separate groups. Females with similar-aged calves stay close together so their offspring can socialize. The young are kept in a creche in the middle of the herd for protection. Despite the care, the young male's future is far from assured. With danger from predators, disease, and above all the heat and lack of water, 30% of young camels won't reach their third birthdays. To survive the dangers of the desert, this little guy's on a steep learning curve. By 8 a.m., it's reached a scalding 35 degrees. The temperature will continue to climb. There's another herd on the dunes that has its own adaptations to survive. These are sand gazelles. They get all their water from their food. They must eat 30% of their body weight daily and keep constantly on the move, covering 15 kilometers a day in search of fresh grazing. Even their extreme physiology doesn't guarantee their success. In bad drought years, half the gazelles may perish. The oryx are also experts in conserving water. Their breakfast consists of little more than dry grasses, but there'll be enough moisture in the plants to keep them alive. Their extremely efficient kidneys make sure no water is wasted. They produce ultra-concentrated urine and dry droppings. As humans get hot, we sweat to maintain a constant internal temperature. No matter how hot it gets, oryx won't sweat. They cannot afford to lose the water. Instead, they will allow their internal body temperature to rise to around 39 degrees, while still keeping their brain cool. The excess body heat will dissipate during the cooler night. Oryx are browsers, and plants like this tribulus are a vital source of minerals. Vegetation is sparse, especially here, where there's little but loose sand. Even for plants, life's a day-to-day struggle for survival. Dune grasses are one of the few species to colonize the shifting sand. Their long roots search a large area for water and ensure they catch as much moisture as possible on the rare occasions that it rains. These roots help stabilize the dunes themselves. Thick skins help prevent water loss to evaporation, but they don't protect them from the oryx's battery of tough, grinding teeth. Another challenge for life out in the desert is the lack of cover for hiding. But there are some stealthy specialists. Lying motionless, with her sandy, mottled coat, the sand cat's easy to miss. She looks like a house cat, but is much more reclusive and nocturnal. Seeing one out in the open, especially by day, is extremely rare. She typically spends her days in a cool, underground den, but this morning she's enjoying the fresh air before it gets too hot. The sandcat is the only feline species adapted solely for a life on sand. Her soft, dense fur protects her from the sun's rays and insulates her during the cold night. Her claws are more retracted and blunter than other cats because she often digs her prey from the sand. The pads on her feet are hairy to act like snowshoes, keeping her from sinking into the sand. Food resources are scarce, but water is non-existent, so the cat must hunt to obtain moisture from her food. This can be anything from insects to hairs. Like all predators, she spends most of her time sleeping, up to 18 hours a day. Even as she rests, she seems to be dreaming of a hunt. It doesn't take much to wake her. Lizards are her primary prey. Thanks to her hairy feet, she barely leaves footprints and can tiptoe in silence. Warmed by the hot sun, the lizard's turbocharged. She prefers to hunt at night and will return to her den to sleep through the hot day. The air temperature reaches a peak of 50 degrees in the early afternoon. But the sand, having absorbed the morning sun, is much hotter, 65 degrees, hot enough to boil an egg. Even camels struggle. They rarely find enough shade, so sit side by side facing the sun. This way, only their narrow front is exposed directly to the rays, not their broad sides. The little calf learns by copying his mother. To protect their bodies from the scalding heat of the sand, they have thick calluses on their chests, knees, and wrists. They stop the rest of the body from contacting the sand. Camels have thick curly fur that reflects the heat. The surface of the fur can be hot to the touch, but the covering's so efficient that the skin remains much cooler. Only if their bodies reach 42 degrees, a potentially fatal temperature, will the camel sweat to try and cool down. The oryx have a different technique to beat the heat. Northerly winds are fairly constant here and build during the afternoon. The oryx climb the dunes, exposing themselves to the breeze. The wind's hot, but it's better than nothing. Now their white coats act as reflectors, bouncing back rather than absorbing the sun. They have broad feet to spread their weight, making it easier to walk on the dunes. The hooves also make good shovels, and the antelope can dig to expose a cooler bed of sand, the ideal place to sit. The air they breathe in cools their blood as it travels to their brains, preventing tissue damage from the heat. Once the afternoon temperature has reached its peak, even the oryx must seek shelter. Little gullies in the dunes hold just enough moisture and offer slightly better ground for plant life. An oasis that creates small pockets of shade. The herd male picks the best seat in the house. Everyone else must fit in around him. the calves must still follow herd protocol. Settled in, they'll sit out the afternoon sun. The dunes of the desert have a life of their own. They're always on the move, slowly drifting southeast. Winds are constantly blowing from the northwest, picking up the grains and depositing them again. The ripples follow the direction of these prevailing winds. At their biggest, the dunes can be 100 kilometers long and 3 kilometers wide. The dunes are supported by gravel beds, pebbles that are too big for the wind to shift. The stones were washed out from the surrounding mountains during the Ice Age, when the climate was a lot wetter. The rivers that deposited them have long since dried up. Now sand flows in their place. By 5 p.m., the sun is starting to sink. Temperatures gradually release their grip on the desert. The sandfish emerges from his daytime hideout. Now at a more comfortable temperature, he can hunt. Normally, he uses his sensitive hearing to locate beetle larvae burrowing in the sand. But ants are on tonight's menu. He'll need to be careful. He's not the only reptile around. And some of his neighbors can be deadly. Diagonal tracks, a clue that another predator is nearby. A horned viper moves over the dunes with his body raised, so that only 2 points are ever in contact with the hot sand. The raised dunes give him a chance to absorb the last few rays of sun, to ready himself for the kill. He's an ambush hunter and looks for a place to lie in wait for a target to wander too close. Lizards, birds, and small mammals are his preferred prey. Now in a prime position, he waits for the cover of darkness. At dusk, a new cast of characters comes to life. The Rappel's fox sleeps in a den to escape the heat of day. But now as it cools off, he's also ready to hunt. Most members of the dog family pant to cool down, but this tiny fox has other options. His huge ears help with heat loss. He loses 55% less water than other mammals of the same size. Like so many here, he gets all his moisture from his food, which can be anything from small mammals to plants. He tiptoes quietly, thanks to long hair covering the pads of his feet. Though it helps him make a quiet approach, their most important role is protecting his pads from the burning sand. Like a bloodhound, he follows his nose. An acute sense of smell brings great rewards. A dead bird is a lucky find. By day, there are only a few species of mammals visible in the desert, but night reveals a far greater diversity. Many have been hiding right beneath the camel's feet. There are 80 species of mammal in Saudi Arabia. Most are rodents. For tiny mammals like this gerbil, the open is a dangerous place. Survival depends on the safety of a burrow. He forages for seeds and grasses, and even the occasional insect. Coming out at night means the gerbil can avoid the sun. But deadly predators roam in the dark. The horned viper's found his ambush spot. He's coiled and ready to strike. He can detect the vibrations of the approaching prey, feeling its movements as he lines up his attack. He can taste its scent with his forked tongue. After injecting his lethal venom, the viper retreats. Death comes quickly. Prey of this size is usually dead within 90 seconds. The snake will stay out of the way of its sharp claws and teeth until its victim is helpless. The bones of its lower jaw don't actually dislocate. They aren't fused together at all. The point where they meet at the front and where they connect with the skull at the back is supported by stretchy ligaments. The viper eats the gerbil head first, so that its limbs fold neatly against its body and don't catch in the snake's throat. He tries to do this as quickly as possible, because with his mouth full, he could be vulnerable to other predators. It might take half an hour to swallow the gerbil and several days to digest it. At night, insects are also more active. Now that the temperatures drop to a more comfortable 30 degrees, dehydration is less of a threat. Like the gerbil, their chance of running into a predator increases. A Ruppel's fox uses its keen hearing and sense of smell to locate a meal. The fox patrols a large territory, around 70 square kilometers, so there can be a lot of walking to find food. But persistence pays off. A large locust is a protein-packed meal. By 6 a.m., light begins its return to the dunes. and heat is on the rise. As usual, there's a changeover in the animal community. Surviving rodents retreat to their burrows. The day shift begins once more. The sandfish is cautious as he looks for a safe spot to bask and warm up. But this morning, he doesn't need to worry. After its huge meal, the horned viper is resting and realigning its jaws. He needs to sit in a safe spot and digest his prey. As he warms up, he'll process his meal more efficiently. Thanks to strong enzymes in his stomach, he'll be able to digest the entire gerbil except for its hair and claws, which he'll excrete. As the sun climbs towards the middle of the day, the weather conditions slowly change. Warm winds are constantly shifting the desert sands, molding and moving the dunes. During the summer afternoons, areas of high pressure intensify the breeze. The ingredients for the perfect storm. The bank of cloud is a sign of trouble. The high pressure stirs the winds, getting more of the fine particles airborne. A common but deadly threat arises: a sandstorm. For the inexperienced, it could be a death sentence. It would be easy to get lost in the darkness, blinded by the sharp particles, or suffocated as sand fills the lungs. But desert specialists have their coping mechanisms. Camels can squint into the storm thanks to large bushy eyebrows and long lashes that protect their eyes. They can close their nostrils to prevent inhaling sand. Luckily, most sandstorms blow over quickly. Sometimes the desert's far less forgiving. Beneath one of the nearby trees is a reminder of just how fragile life can be. The bones of a young camel. Even ships of the desert can sink. The desert can be devastating, but destruction can also bring opportunity. The storms brought down an acacia. The crumbly, sandy soil wasn't enough to anchor the tree. Even for plants, death is ever present. But the tree's loss is the camel's gain. Camels specialize in eating the least edible of plants. Their thick, rubbery lips act like fingers to pick up tiny leaves and bark from around large thorns. Like all ruminants, or animals that chew the cud, they don't have teeth in the front of their upper jaw. Instead, the lower incisors nip against a tough palate. It's like a pair of pruning shears with a blade cutting against a flat surface. The incisors strip bark from the fallen branches. Even the toughest woody material can be ground down by a battery of powerful molars in the back of the jaws. The food will be partly digested and then brought back up for a second chewing to absorb as many of the nutrients as possible. The gorging camels stir up insects that were hiding in the vegetation. Among them, a master of disguise. A female striped or devil's flower mantis. 6 centimeters of killer instinct. She's a stealth predator. She creeps forward, rocking her body back and forth as though blown by a breeze, adding realism to her leafy disguise. The name praying mantis comes from the folded arms, which seem to be held up in prayer. But this isn't an act of repose. Her weapons are concealed. Her claws can be swung forwards with incredible speed, pinning her insect prey against the spine-lined arms. But despite her weaponry, she's not immune to attack. For a predatory bird, like the sharp-beaked shrike, the mantis could become a meal. She cautiously retreats. But these avian hunters are also hunted. The flocking featherweights don't go unnoticed by the sandcat. With so many pairs of eyes watching, it's hard to sneak up. The camels ignore the community around them. They need to eat as much as they can while the going's good. The hump of a camel stores fat. When food's abundant, its body produces the fat and strong fibrous connective tissue to hold it in place. Most animals store fat on their bodies, but fat's an insulator and would cause a desert animal to overheat. By storing it in the hump, it doesn't interfere with the camel's ability to stay cool. It's a survival backpack. When the animal falls on hard times, it can metabolize the fat, producing both energy and water. The young camel barely has a hump at all. It will take a while to build up good reserves. In the height of summer, even the adults are low on supplies. Their humps have diminished, a reminder that resources in the desert can be few and far between. They must always restock when they can. While the adults feed, the young play. They are necking and nipping. But these little guys won't be engaging in true sexual behavior for at least 6 years, so they have plenty of time to perfect their act. The oryx have been trekking all day, as the temperature's risen around them. By late afternoon, their endurance pays off. The storms brought with them light rains, something oryx are capable of detecting from as much as 80 kilometers away. The water's long gone. It's evaporated or drained through the sand, but the plants have trapped some. Moisture-rich vegetation is worth traveling for. The Arabian oryx was once hunted to the brink of extinction. It was only captive breeding and release that saved the species. Today, a mere 1,000 roam wild in the desert. Though their numbers have stabilized, they're still considered vulnerable. Even with protection from hunting, their survival hangs in the balance. They're at the mercy of the environment and must trudge every day to eke out their living. Not all of them will make it. The harsh environment claims around 40% of the calves before they reach maturity. So far, this herd's doing well. The fresh vegetation is a welcome feast. Even the youngest calf is having his first nibble. In a few weeks, he'll be on his own. He needs to use this time to watch and learn, to master finding food and moisture and beating the heat. He needs to be ready for a life on the dunes.